Hey, this is John Flansburgh of They Might Be Giants, and you're listening to the Skeptic Zone.
Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 238 for the 12th of May 2013. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. And yes, later on in the show, Maynard interviews John Flansburgh from They Might Be Giants. They Might Be Giants. Now, this is a group, I know many of you are fans of They Might Be Giants, this is a group who strongly support science. And later in the show we'll find out more with Maynard's spooky action. Good on you, They Might Be Giants. And after that interview, we'll play the song from They Might Be Giants, Science is Real. That's all coming up later in the show. To kick off the show, one of the best Dr. Rachie reports I think we've ever had. It's just amazing. Rachie discusses the latest goings-on with the AVN, as she normally does, but this one is particularly good. It's particularly good. We're going to play clips from the floor of the New South Wales Parliament to see what the politicians from both sides of the House, let's find out what they have to say about the Australian Vaccination Network. And maybe you can use this episode of the Skeptic Zone, this Dr. Rachie reports, and play it to your local politician, no matter where you are in the world. This is what we're doing in Australia. Let your local politicians know. Anyway, I think you're going to really enjoy this Dr. Rachie reports. And of course, coming up a bit later in this week's show, A Week in Science with our good friend Dr. Paul Willis from the Royal Institution of Australia. That's www.riaus.org.au. So much to get through on this week's show, but before we get into the episode, a little personal note from me. When I was in the Czech Republic just recently at the wonderful AFO festival, film festival in Olomouc, I was doing lots of origami, and I was doing a workshop, and this wonderful lady came up and thanked me very much and told me that she came from sort of a school for special needs children in Prague. And I was quite interested to hear this, so I gave her one of my DVDs, origami DVD, with how to make origami models, and she was so happy. And I thought to myself, wow, that's really great. And it's nice to think that maybe the kids can get a benefit out of that. And it's just reminded me that, yes, I've got this DVD I made with my good friend Gary Clark, who also makes origami. It's called DVD Origami. It's still on sale if you'd like to buy a copy. There are 20 models, all step-by-step, over 2 hours of instructions, and you can make dinosaurs and boats and horses and hats and birds and all sorts of things. If you're interested, please visit www.maximedia, that's MAXIMEDIA, maximedia.com.au/DVD-origami. Or you just Google DVD, origami, Maximedia or something like that. Anyway, if you enjoy origami, I think you'll enjoy that DVD. But for now, let's get into this week's episode of The Skeptic Zone.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
Hello listeners and welcome to Dr. Rachie Reports. Well, some of you may have seen my talk at QED recently in Manchester, and before I get into this week's report, I want to say thanks to everyone who I met at QED, and especially to the organisers. So at QED I did talk about the efforts by Australian skeptics and also just a bunch of ruffians, if you like, known as Stop the Australian Vaccination Network, or SAVN, and how our work or grassroots campaigning has affected the reputation of the Australian Vaccination Network. Well, in the last week or so, I was extremely surprised and very pleased to see one of our local newspapers put forth a campaign called No Jab, No Play. This is Murdoch-run press, and they decided to dedicate a whole week to exposing the dangers of the anti-vaccination movement and calling on the government to bring in legislation to ban unvaccinated children from attending childcare, and also to close the loophole that allows parents who don't vaccinate to still receive the family tax benefit associated with completing the childhood immunisation schedule. Now, of course, as you can imagine, the anti-vaxxers' heads exploded at this because it was a week of relentless campaigning by the Murdoch press. Of course, the usual canards were rolled out, including things such as Murdoch has somehow a link to Big Pharma or is sponsored by Pfizer, as well as the standard sort of it's a conspiracy and this is suppressing our human rights and freedom of speech, etc., etc. But the situation in Australia now is becoming a bit like a vacuum. The anti-vaxxers are still screeching, but nobody's listening anymore. It's now become the media focusing on how this impacts on the community, as opposed to this is my rights as a parent. Now, it's important to note that, of course, exemptions for people that have medical conditions or have had adverse events previously to vaccinations or have some sort of allergy to vaccinations would obviously be exempt from having to get vaccinations if they go into childcare. The campaign was simply designed to close the loophole for parents who don't have a valid reason, except that they just don't like it. So if you didn't think this was bad enough, the AVN has also been copying an absolute bollocking in New South Wales Parliament in the last 2 weeks. This is off the back of changes to legislation for the Public Health Act, which I touched on when I was in QED, and that is to close some loopholes that were exposed in the Act when the AVN sued the New South Wales Healthcare Complaints Commission back in 2010. Now, this legal action was on the back of the HCCC investigating the Australian Vaccination Network and determining that they posed a risk to consumers, their information was misleading, it was purely anti-vaccination, and that consumers should not use it as medical advice. Now, the AVN claimed that the HCCC did not have jurisdiction over them, and so they took them to the Supreme Court and they sued them and they won. Now, they were right that at the time the HCCC did not have jurisdiction over them. However, since that was revealed, the law has now been changed so that the HCCC now does have jurisdiction over the AVN. Now, as this bill was being discussed in Parliament, and it's been discussed 3 times now, and it's likely to become law in the next couple of weeks, there were many politicians from both sides of politics, by the way. So this was a bipartisan discussion. People from both sides of politics agreed on one issue, and that was that the AVN has to be stopped. Now, all of the goings-on from question time in Parliament are transcribed and stored on a document called Hansard. So, of course, anyone can go and read what these members of Parliament had to say about the AVN. I think you'll agree, once I've read you some of these quotes, that time is up for the AVN, with people tolerating their nonsense, their misinformation, their scaremongering, and their pretending to be a choice network instead of being honest about their agenda. So first I'm going to play you an excerpt from Anthony Roberts, who is the Minister for Fair Trading in New South Wales, who is the one that will be taking the AVN to court in June, challenging them to change their name. Here's what he had to say in Parliament on Thursday.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for Rockdale for his question and certainly applaud his determination to ensure that the people of New South Wales are not misled by false claims emanating from fringe groups such as the Australian Vaccination Network Incorporated. As members of this House would know, the Australian Vaccination Network, or AVN, actively advocates against the use of vaccinations and denies that immunisation is responsible for the dramatic reduction in many serious diseases in the past century. They do this despite overwhelming evidence that vaccination is a safe, effective and rigorously studied practice that provides people with a high level of protection against numerous dangerous diseases, including several that can be fatal. Madam Speaker, it is incredibly irresponsible for an avowedly anti-vaccination group to advertise itself as a balanced source of information on vaccination. Such an action is not only misleading to the public, but dangerous for those who believe they are referring to evidence-based medical advice. This danger is highlighted further by recent comments from the head of this group, Mr Greg Beattie, who stated, "Don't trust your GP." The AVN does not provide comprehensive or credible information on vaccinations, nor does it offer a balanced view on immunisation. Madam Speaker, the government, the medical community and the Australian Medical Association, led by Associate Professor Brian Aller, are in agreement that the name Australian Vaccination Network is unacceptable. To address this issue in the public interest, the O'Farrell-Stoner government introduced the Association's Incorporation Amendment, Unacceptable Names Regulation 2012, in December of last year. This amendment expanded the classifications of unacceptable names to include any name that is likely to mislead the public in relation to the nature, objects or functions of an association. Following the commencement of this amendment, Fair Trading issued AVN a direction to change the name of its association on the 14th of January of this year. This was done on the basis that the name was undesirable as it had the potential to cause confusion, mislead the public and was against, most importantly, the public interest. The review found that the AVN does not provide a balanced view of the processes, benefits and risks involved with immunisation, and that its views are anti-vaccination and it advises against being vaccinated or taking part in immunisation programs. The review went on to comment that when issues have two sides, it, the AVN, takes just one of them. The Association then, Madam Speaker, put forward some alternative names on the 8th of March, and Fair Trading correctly responded to the Association on the 12th of March. I, in this House, I believe, in this government, are of the opinion that these names don't accurately reflect the true nature, objects or functions of the Association. Then, at the 11th hour, the Association lodged an appeal of the name change direction in the Administrative Decisions Tribunal. At the last hearing on the 22nd of March this year, the President of the Tribunal placed conditions on the organisation, including that a prominent consumer warning be published on the Association's website and its Facebook page by the 26th of March of this year. This warning states that Fair Trading has directed the Association to change its name because it regards the name to be misleading and that this direction is currently being challenged by the Tribunal. Madam Speaker, this warning will help reduce the chance of consumers being misled while the Tribunal proceedings are still to be finalised. I can inform the House that this matter is currently listed for hearing on the 13th and 14th of June of this year. Madam Speaker, the Liberals and Nationals are determined to safeguard public health, and we've acted decisively to do so. Madam Speaker, the recent passage of the Health Legislation Amendment Bill 2013, and which I can proudly say was supported by both sides of this House, is only further evidence of the action we are taking in this space. And two particular members of this House I'd like to pay tribute to. One is the Minister for Health, and one is the Shadow Minister for Health, for their strong work in this area. They've come together, united in this common cause. Madam Speaker, the people of New South Wales can rest assured that the government, and indeed this House, is standing firm on its commitment to protect our community. And I thank all members in this place for their continued support as we tackle this issue. Let me, on behalf of this House, put the AVN on notice.
This is from the Honourable Catherine Cusack. I call on the Healthcare Complaints Commission immediately to stop the Australian Vaccination Network spreading misleading information, and I ask the media as a whole not to facilitate the dissemination of such dangerous messages to vulnerable parents who are already bombarded with confusing information and who somehow believe that the network's role in the immunisation debate is evenly balanced. It is not. Next up was the Honourable Trevor Khan. I note that, at least in part, the amendments to the Healthcare Complaints Commission Act 1993 arose out of the HCCC investigation into the AVN in 2009 and 2010. I am sure a number of members of this place, indeed I suspect all, have received various emails from persons who seek to advance the interests of the Australian Vaccination Network. In the background we hear boo. The Honourable Dr Peter Phelps says, I think insane is the word you are looking for. The Honourable Trevor Khan continues, let us be plain about this. We know that they disseminated material into the community that discourages parents from vaccinating their children. Anti-immunisation groups such as the AVN have touted unscientific propaganda, such as the discredited link between the measles vaccine and autism. The Australian Vaccination Network name is misleading. It implies that it supports immunisation. The Commissioner for Fair Trading, at the encouragement of the Minister, has issued a direction under the Associations Incorporation Act for the AVN to change its unacceptable, misleading and deceptive name. I congratulate him on having the guts to stand up against an organisation such as the AVN. I invite members of the community to send emails about my speech. I will happily receive them and respond accordingly. This comment is in reference to Dr Andrew McDonald, who's also a Member of Parliament, who commented in the Hansard several weeks ago that he's had to call police several times because of the threatening emails he's received from supporters of the anti-vaccination movement in Australia. Based on the speeches that were made a couple of weeks ago in Parliament, many of these politicians also received emails in support of the Anti-Vaccination Network. So here the Honourable Trevor Khan is saying, send your emails, I don't care. I'm not going to change my position. And then we have Dr John Kane, who says, amongst other things, I believe that people such as Meryl Dorry from Australian Vaccination Network are behaving in an entirely immoral way. To which a comment comes from the back of the room saying, you will be getting emails now too, John, to which he replies, I have plenty of emails, believe me. My Facebook site became a battleground between rationality and irrationality. Good on you, says the Honourable Trevor Khan. And it continues and it continues and it continues. And there are pages and pages and pages of MPs standing up, condemning the AVN in Parliament and calling for the Healthcare Complaints Commission and the Department of Fair Trading to shut them down. And in the speech that I played earlier from Anthony Roberts, who is the Minister for Fair Trading, you'll notice that he said at the end, I put the AVN on notice. Time is almost up for the AVN. There is going to be now, once this legislation comes through, fresh investigations into the information they disseminate. And importantly, the change in this legislation came about because Meryl Dorry sued the government. So this is your fault, Meryl. This legislation will not just affect the AVN, it will affect every alternative medicine practitioner who makes claims that are likely to affect somebody's well-being. So in the past, you used to have to demonstrate that you had been harmed by a practitioner's advice or their treatment. Now, you just have to demonstrate it's likely it could cause you harm. And in addition to that, the government itself can instigate complaints or action against practitioners if they believe they can also potentially cause harm. So, as a result of this, and as a result of the week-long campaign which ends tonight by the Daily Telegraph, the Murdoch Press, the anti-vaxxers are screeching like banshees. I just want to point out that they brought this on themselves. They definitely brought the legislation change on themselves. And this week-long campaign that was instigated by the Daily Telegraph Murdoch Press, they also brought this idea of no jab, no play on themselves, because in areas where the heartland of the AVN lies, there is levels of something like just 46% of children are completely vaccinated. So there is outbreaks of disease in those areas that has prompted the community to say, we have to put a stop to this. So in essence, the anti-vaxxers are their own worst enemy. And until next time, this has been Dr Rachie Reports.
Now on Belfast FM, we turn to the personal ads. Easygoing and confident Skeptic seeks other critical thinkers for fun, laughter and good times. Must be willing to apply logic liberally and a good listener. Expect something new and interesting every month. Come and meet me in Belfast in Northern Ireland. If this sounds like you, check out my profile on belfastskeptics.com. Music by Kevin MacLeod.
Welcome to A Week in Science from RiAus. This week, the brains of psychopaths and gigglers, greener iron extraction, and settling a twins paradox. Two brainy stories came out this week predicting psychopaths and analysing laughter. UK neuroscientists think they can detect early signs of adult psychopaths in the brains of children with behavioural problems. These children's brains react differently to most people when they see images of others in pain. Meanwhile, a German analysis of laughter found that tickling laughs do not light up the same areas of the brain as joyous or taunting laughter. But a tickle does trigger a more complex pattern of brain activity. The 3 types of laughter are associated with different social contexts and are a complex type of non-verbal communication. US researchers have developed an improved, greener method for extracting iron from iron ore. An electrical current is passed through molten iron ore via electrodes, resulting in the separation of oxygen from iron at the anode, or negative end. The new method uses a chromium-based anode, which can withstand the high temperatures and corrosive conditions experienced during this process. This is a more efficient method of extracting iron that also generates significantly less carbon dioxide than traditional techniques. And now, 4 science headlines in 30 seconds. A DNA study reveals that all Europeans are very closely related, such that a person from the UK and a person from Turkey are likely to share all the same ancestors around 1,000 years ago. A dose of flu for mum during pregnancy may increase the risk of bipolar offspring. New evidence suggests that climate change, not people, drove Australia's giant marsupials to extinction. And science supports our intuition that you shouldn't shop when hungry because you'll pick higher calorie foods. And finally this week, German researchers test how much of our personality is in our genes and how much of it is learnt. They raised identical twin mice in 2 different environments and found that they developed different personalities. A closer look at their brains revealed that their neurons developed differently when they were exposed to varying environments and stimuli. This helps us better understand nature versus nurture and the impact of life experiences on our personalities. If you're hungry for more great science content, why not check out the blogs on our website? This week I looked at a threat to peer review, while other blogs offer a peek at our new play The Clock and reveal the science behind autumn leaves. You'll find our blogs under News on the RiAus website. That's been the highlights of another big week in science. For more information and other science news, check out the RiAus website, riaus.org.au, where you can also sign up for notification of future episodes. You can follow the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag WeekInSci. I'm Paul Willis, and on behalf of the team here at RiAus, see you next week.
Hi, I'm Finn. And I'm Rebecca, and we're the Skepticons. Skepticons is an Irish podcast by the Dublin Skeptic Society. It takes a conversational, irreverent look at science, news and skeptical topics from an Irish perspective. You can find us at www.theskepticons.com. You will always spirit with a strong finance.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
You guys are definitely behind Science. Science is Real is a fantastic song. I mean...
Oh, thank you.
Oh, look, and look, I love it. From the Big Bang to the DNA and that whole album. And it was a children's album as well, so kids could get into science. Was this partially a reaction to all the pseudoscience that's around or not?
Well, I think, I'm not really sure. I don't know much about Australian culture, but there's this, there's a lot of very dull-witted anti-science sentiment in the United States, including like a movement to teach. I believe the expression is "teach the controversy," which is to say, sort of dismantle regular science education and turn it into this sort of open-ended, unknowable lists of superstitions and fake science, along with the real science. And the truth is, a lot of the ideas of science are not controversial. You can understand that when you fly in a plane. You can understand that when you talk on a telephone. You can understand that when there's radioactivity. Science is something that it's a very reasonable pursuit. It's not based on superstition, and it's important that people not just let their imaginations get ahead of them.
Look, John Flansburgh, you did actually make a small mistake when you were doing the science album. I think it was in relation into the sun. You said the sun's a ball of gas, and it turns out that it's plasma. Was that the slight mistake?
Well, we very notoriously covered a song that was written in the 60s that was on an album that John and I both heard as children called Science Songs, which was recorded by a fellow named Tom Glazer. And he recorded a song called Why Does the Sun Shine? Parentheses, the sun is a massive incandescent gas. And the song was written by Tom Glazer and Hy Zerrett, and basically it's an Irish folk melody. It's a passage from the Golden Book Encyclopedia put to an Irish folk melody, and it's kind of a curious hybrid of a song because it has a very strange cadence. The words don't rhyme, and the meter is very kind of herky-jerky, as you can imagine, just applying a passage of the encyclopedia to a song, to a tune. It was the best science of 1965, I would imagine, but it emerges that, since then, it was the one thing on the album that we didn't run by our science consultant because because it was from another source, we assumed that the facts were straight. It seems like a very reasonable song, but basically science, the best understanding of the sun now is that the sun is essentially plasma. I'm not a scientist, and I'm already kind of like over my head trying to explain the difference, but it's not a massive incandescent gas.
Look,
it's plasma.
And the new album is Nanobots, and look, it's great to have you in the country again after 12 years. A lot of people just come running up to you going, "Thank you for coming back," because where have you been?
For a long time, we were getting a lot of sort of negative reports. Rock promoters are not by temperament the most optimistic bunch. We always felt like we had a very solid audience in Australia. We'd always done pretty solid business, and I think we always felt like there's something about Australian audiences that actually really runs parallel to the spirit of what we're doing, which is that, although we are deeply invested in what we're doing and very passionate about what we're doing, we also don't take ourselves completely seriously, and I think that is a balancing act that it's important that we succeed in kind of tempering the more lighthearted parts of what we do with like solid melodies and good songwriting, and obviously we're compared to a lot of other rock bands, we're very upbeat, but it's not just for laughs, I guess, is the thing. Like there's real emotional content to what we're doing.
I think there's something in the Australian psyche that we don't take many things seriously, but at the same time we appreciate artistry, and I think that's where you guys fit into it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's sort of a kindred spirit innate between They Might Be Giants in Australia that is actually quite rare. I mean, we might actually, we might fare better here professionally than in a lot of other territories. So,
is there a problem somewhere where you go, that they just do those funny novelty songs? Do you get like written off like that sometimes? What's interesting is that we've been doing this for 30 years, and when we first started, when we were basically seen as essentially like an art project, we had tremendous success in Germany, where I think we were perceived as bohemians, very much in the tradition of like Frank Zappa, who is held in very high regard there, and there's a lot of the way rock music is consumed by the counterculture there is highly politicized. And they enjoy the tinkering, like your Giorgio Moroder and your Kraftwerk.
Just because you stand apart from the mainstream culture doesn't mean you stand against the mainstream culture. I don't think we're that concerned with. We're not like shaking our fists at the radio, going like, how can this stand? We like a lot of different kinds of music, and we listen to what we like to listen to. So it's not a culture war for us. And I think in the world of rock criticism, it's very hard for people. I think it's difficult in a hot sort of the hothouse environment of rock criticism to not start thinking of bands as kind of pitting themselves against one another, that they're somehow in competition against one another. And I think nothing is really further from the case for us. But what's interesting is that when we started, we were very much seen as sort of culture warriors against the mainstream in Germany. And then over time, especially as we became more commercially viable as an international act, I think it was very hard for them to understand us and take us at face value. I think it was sort of like, I think they just thought, oh, these guys, they're just entertainers. We made a mistake. And I think the truth is actually something entirely different. I don't think they were right in the first place or later.
Look, one of my favourite albums of yours is Apollo 18. There's something about that album that really resounded with me, and I love the song Turn Around, probably because it's the only song I can think of that uses the word obsequious.
Called me up from a phone near my building, so I looked out the window at him. He had the same obsequious manner. That was the reason.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, obsequious is a great word.
I mean, you never hear it. I mean, Beyonce has never used it once. What's going on there?
Oh, I don't know. I think she might be tuned into obsequiousness. I think she probably she's probably tired of it.
Now, look, I've only got a few minutes here. I'll rush a few questions past you. Now, I'm a big fan of the Star Trek pajamas. If you were to get the Star Trek pajamas, would you go for the red shirt, the blue shirt, or the gold shirt?
Well, unfortunately, I think I'd probably look a little bit too much like William Shatner in any of them. It's sort of an unflattering look for bulky guys. You gotta be really thin to rock a turtleneck, I think. But I guess I'd go with the blue.
Look, John Flansburgh, back in Australia after 12 years with John Lennon. Don't make it so long next time. You've got sock puppets on, so you've got sock monkeys on stage. Look, the only thing missing from your show currently, I reckon, is a confetti cannon.
Next time, we'll get it through customs.
Thank you, John Flansburgh. Thanks for your time.
Hey, thank you.
Hello!
Hello!
We are They Might Be Giants.
And we want to welcome you to our musical laboratory. As the philosopher Rudolf Carnap once so clearly said,
Science is a system of statements based on direct experience and controlled by experimental verification.
Or as we say, science is real.
Jeg Marit.
Og jeg Kristin. Og vi vil tipse deg som norsk lytter av The Skeptic Zone om skeptikermiljøet i Norge.
Det finnes norske blogger og pubtreff og podcast, og foreningen Skepsis driver med ulike former for aktivisme.
Sentralt skepsis.no, og her publiseres det dyptpløyende artikler, en kalender over skeptiske aktiviteter og lenker til andre skeptiske ressurser.
Skepsisbloggen oppdateres jevnlig, og det diskuteres heftig på Skepsisforumet, så stikk innom og delta du også.
Skepsis.no.
Hello, I'm Marit.
And I'm Kristin, and we want to let you know that there are lots of Norwegian skeptics for you to get to know.
There are blogs and pub meets and a podcast, and the Norwegian skeptics also do paranormal tests and consumer activism.
To find out more, Google Norwegian skeptics or visit skepsis.no.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Wow, what an interesting episode that was again. I think you should tell your local elected representatives what we're doing here in New South Wales in Australia. Coming up on next week's show, I think we've got some more interviews from QED in Manchester. Probably some more Maynard. In fact, definitely some more Maynard. He sent me a lot of stuff lately. And who knows, maybe my voice will sound better. I don't know, why is my voice? It's gone a bit hoarse, folks. I don't know why. I have no clue. Sometimes it just does it. But for now, this is Richard Saunders off to gargle some salty water, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to The Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.